Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we are talking about this one. Fritz Reiner and the Chicago Symphony do pictures at an exhibition. Oh, wow, is this hot. Hot, hot, hot. I mean, Reiner and Chicago were the powerhouse orchestra among the American Big Five. But it's very interesting to consider the work because all of these orchestras, the American Big Five, had a relationship to pictures at an exhibition, actually more than the Big Five, at the same time period, roughly the same time period, say the 50s, the mid-50s or so through the early 60s. And it was kind of remarkable to be able to get the same work played by all of them, and a work that so graphically shows off the skills of the various ensembles. I mean, think about it for a minute. It was really, pictures in an exhibition really was the property of the American orchestras in that period. Not afterwards, but around that time. And there was a reason for it. The reason for it was that Pictures in an Exhibition, the Ravel orchestration, was originally commissioned by Serge Koussevitzky, who was in charge of the Boston Symphony, and he made the first recordings of that orchestration. I think the earliest one was around 1938 or so, somewhere in that area, with the Boston Symphony. And so that was the one that was in Boston. Unfortunately, Boston under Munch did not record pictures in an exhibition, which is a pity. It would have been marvelous if they had. But there was a reason, because they were recording for RCA. And RCA had Chicago and Reiner doing it in living stereo, while they had Munch doing other things in living stereo. But meanwhile, on Sony, the other big label that was sort of America-based, you had Ormandy in Philadelphia, who made a stunning recording of it. Actually, my reference recording of it, my favorite recording of it, is Ormandy's with Philadelphia. And then you had Bernstein of the New York Philharmonic. They did it. And you even had Zell in Cleveland. They did it. And all of these performances really reveal the characters of their various ensembles. Boston Symphony was the Gallic orchestra. It was the greatest French orchestra ever, people said, because they specialized. They had Monteux, they had Munch, they had Koussevitzky, and they did the French and Rousseau French repertoire. And they did it extraordinarily well, as we all know, and it was just marvelous. Then you had Chicago and Reiner. Now, Chicago and Reiner was the powerhouse. They were super detailed, incredibly virtuosic, and brilliantly recorded back in the day. And they did your blockbuster repertoire, more or less. You had Zell in Cleveland. They were the chamber music, refined, absolutely. I mean, not less virtuosic, I would say, but definitely lighter in texture and more transparent and less, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, in the way they handled it. Although Zell actually did his own tinkering with the orchestration in the final pages. And then you have at Ormandy in Philadelphia, they were, of course, the romantic orchestra, also Russian. Remember, Russian repertoire, but not French in the way that the Boston Symphony was French. They were the big, warm, glorious slurpy string thing. And of course, there was Stokowski before, who also had his own version of pictures at an exhibition. So, there was that as well to consider. And let's not forget, too, you was Leonard Bernstein with New York, which was, they were supposed to be the sleek, modern, orchestra for the contemporary classical music listener that did American stuff, that did also very, very technically adroit. And let's also not forget Toscanini, who had done it in mono superbly at NBC. So you were not spoiled for choice when it came to pictures at an exhibition, or you were spoiled for choice, pardon me, when it came to pictures at an exhibition. Fabulous performances, all of them in their ways, quite splendid. But this one was special, and it was special for a few reasons. First of all, you had Reiner's unbelievable ear and precision-oriented direction, which some people found a little bit cold. But in a work like this, which was designed to highlight every single section and first desk player in the orchestra, wow, yeah. And the Chicago Brass, which were even then legendary, particularly because they were led by Bud Herseth, the principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony, who'd made more recordings of this than any principal trumpet in the history of mankind ever. And you can follow his career through pictures at an exhibition, beginning with Raphael Kubelik on Mercury Living Presence. Then you had Reiner, and then you had Ozawa and Schulte and Jarvi and Giulini. I think that's 6. Right? There were 6. There may have been another one that I'm leaving out. You'll tell me if I did. But that's a lot of pictures in an exhibition for this unbelievable trumpet player. This is the trumpet player who out-Reinered Reiner. Herseth's stories are legendary, but the most famous one is the one where Reiner used to pick on his players. He was a sadist. He was a nasty guy, and he would try and trip them up. And he was doing Also sprach Zarathustra, which has that trumpet part at the end, da da da, the trumpet, and he would make players repeat tricky passages until they screwed up. And Herseth just kept doing it perfectly every time, doing it again and again and again. And finally he said to Reiner, "You want me to keep going? I'll keep going." And Reiner finally gave up. That's how the story goes anyway. But so hearing the opening trumpet part played by this legendary trumpeter is a big deal in this legendary performance of Pictures at an Exhibition. And the sonics are amazing, and everybody plays fabulously, and it's just top to bottom clarity and rhythmic verve. It's extraordinary. It really is, and it still is. It still is. And as time goes on, we had this whole discussion about the fact that recordings nowadays are being made live and versus studio recordings and all that. The perfection that was able to be achieved under studio conditions with certain conductors and certain repertoire in this period will probably never quite be matched. It was a moment. It was a moment in recorded history when the stars aligned in a certain way. And there's no work that better shows that off than Pictures at an Exhibition. And there are no recordings that better show it off than the Ormandy recording, and certainly this one under Reiner. They are all just stupendous. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.